So, hello everyone. Welcome to this Q&A session of the Banguoja Audio Festival. My name is Karolis Vyšniauskas, and I'm very glad to speak today with Nanna Hauge Kristensen, an audio artist and anthropologist from Copenhagen, Denmark. You may remember Hannah from her last year's Banguoja work. It was called Summer Rain. It was a short documentary. Also, Summer Rain has won the Best Non-English Language Award at Third Coast Festival in Chicago in 2018. And this year, Nanna is back to Banguoja Festival, this time with the full feature documentary. It's called Heart-Shaped. And this documentary focuses on the life of four elderly people in northwestern Greenland. Nanna Hauge Kristensen, welcome to Banguoja.
Thank you very much. I wish I could be there in person, but yeah, this is also
maybe one
good.
day.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not that far. I guess did we catch you in Denmark now?
Yeah, in Copenhagen.
Okay.
Yeah.
But your work takes us in a place much further from Copenhagen in Greenland, in a place called correct me if my pronunciation is not right. It's called Uummannaq.
Uummannaq,
right?
yes. Yeah.
So can you tell our listeners more about how did you even how do you make a documentary in Greenland? First of all, you need to go there. Second of all, you need to make connections with people, and it seems when you listen to it, it seems that it means that those connections are deep, and you really gain trust of the people you interviewed. But I imagine that there was a long process. Could you guide us through that? How did you approach this task?
Yeah, I think it started with a kind of selfish wish of going to Greenland. Because I think as a Dane, it is important to go to Greenland, as Greenland is formerly a part of Denmark, and we have a colonial story, which I guess we will also talk about. So I think knowing Greenland and knowing this story is important for me as a Danish person. And then I received money from a fund that supports mainly projects that has to do with elderly people. And I'm often attracted to work with elderly people. So I thought I would go to this place, Uummannaq, which I was recommended by an anthropologist. So this was actually meant also to support her research in a way, but in a more sensory way through the audio. So I went there and I spent 17 days in this town where you have to go by helicopter because it's very isolated. I went there in the spring where the sea was covered by ice, which is what it was last year, but this year there wasn't really any ice. So they are also really seeing the climate change there, and they feel it very directly. And I came very much as an anthropologist, meaning it doesn't mean that I wasn't well prepared, but I think I was kind of coming in a very open way, or I hadn't really a clear angle. I knew it was about elderly people. I knew it would be about social relations and about loneliness also. And I had this question on my mind: what happens when the body weakens and you can no longer be present in your life as you used to be? And here in this case also, you cannot be present in nature as you used to be, which is a big part of many Greenlandic people's life. I trusted very much in what we call the snowball effect within anthropology, which means meeting people and then allowing one meeting to lead to the next, and kind of trust that this will create openings into the place or into the environment. And so it did, but it wasn't that easy, actually. Or I found out that 17 days is actually a very short time to both create contacts and meet people and gain trust and so on. So sometimes while I was there, I wished I had prepared better, like had kind of connected with people before I came. But yeah, that was the circumstances I kind of created for myself and this piece.
Yeah, there's always limitations in this work, right? But you said 17 days, 17, right?
Yes, yeah,
like, okay.
17, yeah.
Okay. And from when you listen to your work, it really doesn't feel like it feels like you're part of the community yourself, because it seems that you got into some really personal stories from the people, talking about their relationships, talking about death as well. And I was curious, since you come from the background of anthropology, how did that help you to kind of make connection with people? Because I guess it's a very different approach than journalistic approach, where a lot of audio producers also come to this field.
Yeah. I think what it does is this, that I come like more with a question in mind, as I said, and then what I like to do and is also partly trained to do is to hang out with people. Like, I have experience of doing fieldwork within anthropology, also longer terms fieldworks, where you are there just present at a place and kind of participating and asking questions along the way. So it's a very informal way actually of just being there with people. And I really like that method, because I feel it opens up a lot actually. It opens up I think this just spending time together, spending time in their space in this case, like in their homes and the places they went to, just created a connection where it was kind of easy to relate to each other, and they could show me things. And also maybe working with elderly people is also kind of, how to say it, like, because they did not have so much social interaction. So I think they were also in a way grateful or appreciating my company and the possibility to tell about their lives and just invite me in a way. And of course, I do not know all they did not tell me, but I felt that there was a great openness in a way, and also that, of course, things always develop over time, and trust does and relationship does. And I felt that was actually really interesting to see, like within those 17 days, it was very visible for me to kind of see that development of a relationship. For instance, with Karen, who you will meet in the documentary, like the first couple of times I met up with her, it was very much the good love story of her husband that she told me, and then little by little more and more cracks were added in a way. And that kind of showed me how people tend to tell stories, but when you spend more time with them, the stories unfold in different ways, and sometimes in very human ways, interesting ways.
Yeah. It's almost, at first people want to tell you, I don't know, a more what they think is a better story, or maybe shows them in a different light, and then you get closer to the truth.
Exactly.
It's very interesting. In the very beginning, you mentioned that you did this documentary not only as an anthropologist, but also as a someone who is a Danish citizen, and you kind of felt like this is your obligation to go to Greenland and to learn about colonial history that exists in Greenland because of Denmark. And of course, that puts you in a different power position from the people you're interviewing. And there's always this question, when we make documentaries, like what is our relation with the people we are focusing on? How do we find the right balance? What was your answer to these questions in the heart-shaped documentary?
Yeah, I think actually the questions remain unanswered to me, or I'm still wrestling with those questions, I feel. Because it's kind of, how to say it, like, I have this position, I cannot change that. And it's just a troubled position coming as a Danish person to Greenland, carrying the history that we do. And I included it as a producer's note in the documentary. But actually, I'm still kind of struggling with if I can include it directly in the documentary. So it's not just an add-on in a text. And I tried to do that in the editing also. I tried to incorporate part of the recordings that addressed the colonial story. But I felt it very hard to make it work in a way, or I felt that it was kind of blocking a flow because it was not really what the documentary was about. But I had a very nice conversation with Eleanor McDowell the other day, just to get her perspective on it, because she's a producer who I respect very much. And we were talking about this to allow also the disruptions, to interrupt the flow actually, and to put in those parts that maybe not belong in this story and this focus, but is still important because it's there always as a backdrop to everything that is going on in the documentary also. Like just the language that we speak, the fact that I can go there and speak Danish is because of the colonial history. And of course that also has affected who I had the possibility to talk with, who it gave, like me not speaking Greenlandic meant that I could only talk to the people who wanted to talk to me in Danish, unless I used an interpreter. But that was difficult using this method of hanging out. So I used that in one case with a more kind of formal interview, you might say. But else it's mainly people, or it's actually only people who speak Danish who are present in the documentary. And
and then in that case, you have this person's granddaughter kind of doing translation.
Exactly. Yeah. And the way I tried to balance it in this version was by putting in myself. So it's kind of transparent, the relationship that kind of makes the recordings in a way, or is behind the recordings. And also putting in my very ignorant questions sometimes, or where I kind of feel that I'm quite naive in my way of questioning, also in a way kind of to try to equilibrate, you say, or balance the power, power dynamic in a way. But I'm totally aware of that in the end. It's a very unequal power structure. And I guess it's always like that because we always kind of have the power also in the editing to kind of shape the story as we want to tell it. But here there's just this other dimension of a historical background.
Did the people that you interviewed, did they get a chance to listen to the final documentary?
Yes, I've sent it to them, and I know that Johannes and Ole, and I think also Pavia has listened. Karen has still not listened, so she keeps saying she will do that, but she hasn't. Yeah.
What was the feedback from their side?
Because I had actually hoped also to discuss this issue with them, which I think was maybe a kind of naive thought actually, but because their response was very down to earth, like it's fine. Yeah, I, like Ole said, I didn't know Karen spoke so well Danish, so maybe what occupied them was more like what was close to their community and themselves in a way. And I have asked different questions of the colonial history also, but I guess it's also sometimes a question of generations. Like the elderly people are maybe less critical, because I actually found that I in my question was much more critical than they were in their answers. So I think it's maybe more the younger generation and the generation in the cities that are very aware of the colonial story and also are very aware of their wish of independence and so on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Also want to ask you about the sound of this documentary, because one of your there was the line in the documentary, let me quote it to you. It's called "Silence is essential here in Greenland," and it really feels like that. You feel like this place, it doesn't have many sounds. It's not like there's cars in the street or something. It feels very quiet. But at the same time, it is an audio documentary. You tell stories with sound here, and then you get these sounds of, like, I don't know, chopping fish, or there's some distinct, very almost like very. They really affect you, because the whole soundscape is pretty quiet, and I thought that is such a rare thing in this medium. So and I really enjoyed it. I think it's so. I'm just curious if you could tell more about it. What was your approach with when you were editing? How were you using the sound and kind of recreating the sound of Greenland into this final work that you did?
Yeah, I think I always listen a lot to the sounds also when I edit, and try to let them speak, like also often opening a scene with a sound that kind of places the listener somewhere. And I also like the thought of kind of letting the narration support the sounds instead of the other way around, which I guess is easy to do when you make an audio documentary, that the sounds are more kind of illustrating, but kind of to let the sounds lead the way through the documentary was what I thought intended to do. And I was also sometimes thinking, I'm not making a movie here, because the images, or like the landscape in Greenland is just so fantastic. So in a way it felt a bit poor sometimes with the sounds, but I guess they have their own, they speak to the listener in another way, and I hope that then the listener can imagine the landscape or imagine the scenery in a way. And then some sounds stood very much out, like usually I often ask people to turn off a television if it's on while we talk or record, but there's a scene where Ole is in his home watching television, and there actually the sound were increasing while he was speaking about how the silence kind of cures his tinnitus. And that was just a coincidence in a way that I felt was kind of a gift in that moment, that it appeared that way. And so maybe because it is quite, sorry, I just got distracted because my son got home. Because it is a quiet place, then the sound stood out even more. And there's also, when you are there and there's this vast space with ice and silence in a way, and you can hear like a scooter on the snow, and you think it's very near, and then it's maybe several kilometers away, and when the helicopter comes, it kind of opens like the whole sky with its sound. So there are those sounds that are really fills the space there in a way.
Yeah, it's a very, as this sometimes say about like certain music records, that is very like headphones record, that you need good headphones to get everything what is there in that music. So I felt like with this documentary, you need a quiet place, you need good headphones, and you need to be focused just to get a full effect of it. I guess it's true for for this medium in general, but for this kind of work, I felt like it made a big difference. And here I want to ask you about the structure of your work and of this particular documentary, because when we talk about audio documentaries, when we talk about podcasts, there's a certain tradition that has mostly come from American public media, where everything the stories are usually pretty like tightly, the whole editing is pretty tight. It's quite fast moving, with the fear that maybe if it gets too, I don't know, too slow, people will turn that off. And it seems that with your documentary, you used very different approach, that you trusted listeners to kind of stay with you. For example, even the part with the translation, you have to stay in that part as a listener. You cannot rush it, but it kind of slowly you get into that rhythm, and it feels very dynamic. It feels very adventurous, but it's very different from this maybe traditional approach of audio documentaries that people are used to. It's almost a distinction between, I know, Hollywood cinema and European cinema. But curious, how do you yourself see this? What editing approach did you use for The Heart-Shaped?
I think maybe it was very much the pace of the place and the pace of the people, because it is old people, and Karen does not move very slow. She's actually very active, as you can sense. She has a very active energy, but still it is like elderly people. So I think being slow is more truthful to their rhythm of life in a way. And maybe it's also my inner pace, I don't know, that it reflects in a way. But yeah, I felt it needs time. It needs time for you to be there with the people, to get to know them, to get to kind of imagine the landscape. It felt like it couldn't be rushed in a way. And in that sense, it is different from what also like the Danish editors are asking for. Like, it hasn't been broadcasted here in Denmark for the very same reason, that it's too slow and it's
Really?
not explanatory enough, or like the fact that it does not take the listener by the hand the way that a lot of radio does at the moment. Kind of makes it difficult for it to have a home, actually, except from spaces like your festival and Primarolique, where it was, and other places. But so that's kind of the price I pay by choosing to that kind of approach to the material, to my material. But I wouldn't like to compromise, actually.
Interesting. Yeah, you felt like it was true to the very subject that you chose.
Yeah, and life is not always moving fast. It can be quite slow sometimes, and I'm quite inspired by there's an essay by Ursula Le Guin, which is called The Carrier Bag Theory of Fiction, and she writes it, or she uses this kind of as a how do you say that? As an inspiration for storytelling. And it's actually about that the first invention was not a spear, or it was not a sword. It was not those very goal-oriented objects. It was a carrier bag that people used to gather things in and keep things in. And she says the same thing goes for storytelling, that a lot of the stories we tell are shaped as the sword. They are very goal-oriented. They have always heroes in them. And like she prefers stories that are like a carrier bag, because there's space for much more, like messiness and entanglement and all those like kind of ambiguous and nonlinear ways of being in the world. That is actually how we are here. And I guess I like to think of an audio piece as a carrier bag in a way, where I can kind of gather different moments and atmospheres and meetings, and then shape this story or this piece that can contain that.
Yeah, that's beautiful and makes total sense. Going to the end, I want to ask you, what did you, of course, every listener will take something from your work, and this will be very personal, but I'm curious how it was for you. You said you wanted to go to Greenland. You felt like you have to do it, and a lot of people would like, even if you're not a citizen of Denmark, it's just a place that's very hard to reach, and where I guess as Westerners we can see that as some kind of place where that is not touched by all the things that we don't like about the Western world, that it's almost like an escape from it. At least that's the perception that we can have here. And I'm curious, when you went there, and what did you want to bring back to the listeners back home? Like, was there something that you felt like that you discovered in that world that you felt you want to bring to the people here? And also there's a risk of kind of making that place to seem, I don't know, more somehow exotic, or all that territory that we don't want to go. But curious, what you in this situation, you are in a place where a lot of people couldn't go. What did you want to bring back?
I guess a sense of the people there, or at least the people I met, which were the only ones I could kind of bring into the documentary. And yeah, it is true, there is this trap about exoticism, or going into a kind of making it very exotic. And I was very aware of that. And maybe I sometimes also edited out too much, because I thought now it gets kind of stereotypical, or now, it kind of speaks into also the prejudice that many Danish people have about Greenlandic people. So actually I cut away a lot. Which is also interesting to observe my own way of kind of editing and censoring, or like, but what did I want to bring back? I think I just hope to bring back this sensation of kind of going there through the soundscape in a way, and spend some time with some people there and get a sense of what occupies them. And I'm not sure I had a very clear intention about what I wanted to bring back, actually.
Yeah. Maybe you don't really need it, just that. Yeah. For the very end, I want to ask you about just now moving away from the hardship piece. And we are talking for listeners in Lithuania for Banguoja Festival, and narrative audio tradition is still pretty young in Lithuania, but there are a lot of people interested to try this medium. If you could go back to the very beginning of your explorations with sound, what were the things that made you fall in love with this medium? And what would be your advice to those people who want to try themselves in the medium of sound? How can they approach this adventurous audio world?
Yeah, I guess what I fell in love with was the intimacy of sound. Like, it's both very intimate to listen to sound pieces, and they speak to the listener's own imagination and inner world, or like memories also. So in that sense, I feel it's kind of a relationship you can kind of have with a piece. And also, like, I feel it's a medium that kind of allows intimacy also in the recording, because the audio recorder is not so big, so it's actually possible to bring it and to be close to people without it being too intimidating for them. So I feel that people are actually often ready to share their life, although I bring a recorder. And sometimes it takes time and they need to get used to it, and other times it doesn't. But I feel actually, yeah, of course, the audio recorder always does something because it's there as a co-presence in the space. But I feel it allows intimacy. And then it's not so difficult actually to edit. Like I kind of just, yeah, learned it by doing it. And I think everyone can do that. So I think for me, like, it's very much about listening to what you like, and yeah, notice what you like and get inspired from that. And then maybe also seek out the producers that you find interesting. For instance, when I was starting to work with audio, I had an internship with Rikke Holt. So that was also a way to get closer to working with audio and to a person who worked with audio in a way that inspired me. Yeah, and then just take your time, allow yourself to take the time to get to know the medium and get to know your way of working with it and your expression within it, and go for the stories or the themes that kind of speaks to you.
That sounds really inspiring. Thank you so much, Nanna Hauge Kristensen. We are really proud to present your heart-shaped documentary to Banguoja listeners, and really hope to see you here in Vilnius one day.
That would be great. Yeah, thank you.